What is up, Nets fans? Welcome to the Brooklyn Buzz, presented by OTGBasketball.com and NetsRepublic.com. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, the great Jac Manuell. What's up, Jac?
Man, I am so excited for Nets basketball, and the season reviews felt like they were a few days ago, but now we're on to the previews, the different views.
Yes, player previews. We just had media day. It's really getting close to the season. It's about almost a week away till we see Nets basketball on the court. And like you said, Jac, we're going to preview this upcoming season for Jarrett Allen. We're going to do a couple different players, but Jarrett Allen will be our first one. Before we get started, as always, check us out on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, NetsRepublic.com, Dash Radio, and YouTube. But we're going to look back quickly at last year. If you want a more in-depth, breakdown about last season's Jarrett Allen, check out one of our season reviews. But obviously, Allen, it was a big surprise last year. I think he was even a big surprise in terms of the draft class, low-key. He was one guy I don't think many people expected to have as big an impact as he did. And it looks like he'll be a building block for the Nets moving forward.
Yeah, the perfect prototypical modern center. I actually saw, I had a bit of a listen to our season review just to refresh my memory. It's fun listening to yourself speak about the things that you already know and have already said. But also, he was so good in so many areas. He exceeded expectation in so many ways. He's going to be a real building block, like you said, Nick, going forward. There were plenty of room to improve, but he exceeded expectations in so many areas that, he's built a great foundation in season one.
Yeah, and one of his best games of the season, 18 points, 8 of 11 from the field, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 blocks, and that was against Chicago. I believe that was also the game where he, might have murdered Lauri Markkanen, but, we'll leave that for the police. Success or disappointment? This is a very easy question, but Jac, what was it?
Oh, man, it was an absolute success. I think that, the fact that he played, over 70 games as well, I would have been happy with 50 games or so. We were talking about, is he going to play? Is he going to be G League bound? So I think it was an absolute adamant success for Jarrett Allen last season.
100% agree. I think it was a huge success. And like I said, it's a building block moving forward for the Nets. Now, looking at some of his strengths and weaknesses from last season, obviously the length and the height is huge. The athleticism is huge. The pick and roll as a roll man, he finished in the 68th percentile as a roll man. Obviously finished a ton of alley-oops, a ton of dunks, had a lot of nice blocks as well. What were some of the strengths for you for Jarrett Allen last year?
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of them, Nick, but in terms of his athleticism, that agility that he has for a guy that's 6'11" is, something that, you want to have in your, you don't want to have a lumbering sort of guy. We saw that and then some with guys like Timofey Mozgov on our roster. So to have Jarrett Allen, who has that quick motion and is able to, at times, defend those smaller guys and be able to move laterally. He was quite quick. He was very good in the pick and roll, like you mentioned. He had an insane effective field goal percentage, 59.6%. And then, I remember this tweet because it's one of my most popular ones, that he was third in the league for blocks per game after the All-Star break at 2.1, behind only Gobert and the Defensive Player of the Year and an MVP contender in Anthony Davis. So solid company for Mr. Allen, but there were so many successes and strengths throughout the season for him.
Yeah, and you mentioned the agility and the speed. I think Kenny's brought that up too in terms of the fast break and transition, being faster than a lot of bigs. Also on the pick and roll, he's almost sneaky, where he'll act like he's gonna set a pick real quick and low key just kind of slide to the rim very quickly, get a nice open space, find himself, a nice little dunk right there. But I agree. I think strengths, there's just a lot of things. But weaknesses wise, obviously rebounding, putting on more weight, polishing his game, and probably getting to the free throw line a little bit more. But what were some of the weaknesses for you, Jac?
Yeah, I think you can't really hate on too much in terms of his body. He's a kid. But for me, rebounding, I think, is one thing that you can sort of nitpick out a little bit. We love Brook Lopez so much, but we also know that he is one of the weaker big man rebounders that we've ever had and that the league has ever seen. But he makes up for it in so many other areas. And Jarrett Allen did to an extent as well. But he does have size about him, and I think his frame obviously prevented him of sorts from getting so many boards. But I think as well, it might have been an engagement issue, I think a body positioning issue, and experience. I think it's a combination. But I think, he's mentioned in the media day and in plenty of interviews that rebounding is going to be one of the cornerstones for him. And, Ed Davis is going to certainly help with that, as he's one of the best, backup center rebounders in the league. But I think the key one is rebounding. And it's not that he was horrible there, but it's certainly an area for a 6'11" guy that he can get better at.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, I think age had a big impact on that, and probably fatigue, just battling bigger guys every night. It just kind of wears on you. But talking about the weaknesses, moving to areas you would like to see him improve this year, what would it be?
I think number one for me, it's rebounding, Nick. I think that it seems that the coaching staff with Kenny and even Sean Marks are making it an emphasis. You look at the guys that we acquired, and I think Jarrett Allen can be a part of that. I think, in training camp, he's going to be battling against Ed Davis and Kenneth Faried, two of the best rebounders in the game today. We've seen stats from Nets Republic, myself putting out there, that their rebound percentage and offensive rebound percentage is, top five, on a very consistent basis. I think Jarrett Allen can learn from them. The mentorship that he can get from those experienced guys is going to have a big effect. I think also the defensive sort of liabilities. I want him to be actively engaged for all the time that he's on the floor. Obviously, those lapses. And I mean, we mentioned the 3-point shooting percentage. I don't think, or the 3-point shooting attempts, I don't think that that's, for me, as big an issue. Like, if I'm prioritizing the two, I'd rather have a decent rebounder at the center position than a 3-point shooter. But it certainly helps. I'm sure you'll probably say similar things, Nick, but do you have a preference for what you want Jarrett Allen to get better at in 2018-19?
I think pretty much what you said, Jack. Rebounding is huge. I think defensively, maybe being a little bit more aggressive and being more confident in your ability, having the skill set he has, and maybe trying to be more of a vocal leader. Obviously, we know he's a very quiet guy, but I think he could, help being that backline defender that's kind of yelling out and shouting out things and seeing the whole floor, because he seems like a super intelligent dude. So I wouldn't be surprised he's able to kind of grow into that role. And to get back to the rebounding, he even mentioned at media day, like learning small things from Ed Davis, battling him every day in practice. I think that'll benefit him. And then just, working on his offensive skills. I don't expect him to make some giant jump offensively where he's, dribbling the ball, crossing over, getting triple doubles or anything like that. But I think continuing to kind of polish on the offensive game, maybe shoot 1-3 a game or something along those lines. Not a big number, because I think his big value, and like he said yesterday, is the pick and roll, rolling to the rim, providing that vertical spacing, kind of collapsing the defense because he's so athletic. I think that's where he should really focus on and becoming elite in that area. How do you think his new teammates and his coaches will help him kind of get these new skills?
I think it's going to be in training camp, Nick, and I think it's also going to be mentorship. I think they're going to impart, what they know about, opponents, how to do the body positioning. I think that, in the pick and roll, Alan Crabb mentioned it, and it was a video on the Nets Republic YouTube that I watched, how he said that Ed Davis is, very underrated in the pick and roll. You learn from your teammates. You spend so much time with them in that 82-game grind. I think it's going to be up to them to impart that wisdom upon him. And obviously, we've heard about Jarrett Allen's low-key mentality in that Bleacher Report piece that we referenced before on The Buzz. I think a lot of those things that they're going to be able to impart with him, he seems to be, a sponge when it comes to imparting that information. And he's got that really low-key, confident, and gritty mentality that I think he's going to take those things on and hopefully, work upon them. But there's some great pieces on netsrepublic.com as well about Jarrett Allen and what he needs to do and some certain stats and stuff. So definitely check those out as well.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said earlier in the show, Nets Republic's been turning out a lot of great articles. Be sure to check them out. And getting back to Jarrett Allen, you mentioned the knowledge. I think in an interview with Draft Express yesterday, he mentioned knowledge is power. And the one thing that's going to help him so much this year is knowing what to expect after last season. So I think that'll be a big benefit. And like you said, Ed Davis, Kenneth Faried in practice, battling for boards should only help him in the physicality department. And then chemistry-wise with the guards, playing a full season with Spencer Dinwiddie, D'Angelo Russell, Karis LeVert, I think they'll feel better about connecting on those oops and have a little bit better chemistry where you might see them happen even more frequently. And then we already know how much Kenny loves Jarrett Allen. That's like maybe one of his favorite players on the team. So any other guys or ways you think are going to help him improve?
Yeah, just to continue on with your chemistry thing there, Nick, I think that the Nets are revered for their chemistry across the league. And, we've seen there was a Brooklyn Bridge episode on NBA.com, a really nice piece done by the social media team at the Brooklyn Nets. And it just showed, the cohesiveness, the camaraderie that this Nets squad has. It shows that, you have to know each other off the court and know each other as people to know each other and get the best out of each other on the court. So I think that, we saw the jokes at Media Day and such, and I think all of it is going to bode really well. There's lots of different personalities there, but there's an inherent respect and an inherent desire for all of them to want to get better and, help each other along the way. And I think the guards, like you mentioned, as well as the big men, are going to play a big part in the development of Jarrett Allen as well.
Yeah, and then even just having some better players on the floor, like we've mentioned before, improving the roster in terms of depth, I think will just help him and make his life a little bit easier. But going to next season, what is going to be his role on this team? Obviously, this is a really easy question, but starter or bench player?
It's a starter. We don't need to debate that any further. This is in game 20 of 2017-18. There's no one There might be nights where I wouldn't be surprised if Ed Davis does usurp him. If he's coming up against a Dwight Howard or an Anthony Davis or DeMarcus Cousins, and Jarrett Allen hasn't found that form yet. He's certainly gotten a lot bigger. We've seen his body. We've seen the photos making the rounds.
His arms looking jacked.
They are. They certainly are. And pardon the pun, for you. But I think as well that Coach Kenny is going to start him, and then if it happens to be that he's struggling a little bit, then he will be subbed in for a guy like a Davis or a Fareed. But he's going to be starting. Majority of however many games, an overwhelming majority of the games that he's playing.
To paraphrase, I saw a quote yesterday from him, and it was like, how do you know you've gotten stronger or like more muscle mass? He's like, I haven't put on a lot more weight, but I'm lifting higher numbers at the gym. And that just seems like such a Jarrett Allen answer.
It's the more you know, the knowledge is power. Like if you can lift more, it means that your muscles must be getting bigger. And I think as well that muscle mass is overrated a lot. I think we've talked about it, in reference to Jarrett Allen. It's about strength. And I think, you look at Brandon Ingram, Kevin Durant, these guys are very slender. But Kevin Durant has become an absolute monster on the defensive end. Brandon Ingram showed strides there as well. But it's about, having that strength and that positioning and all those sort of little things outside of just lifting a barbell, lifting a dumbbell, that sort of can actually help you on the court. I think that those things have a bigger impact as much as getting into the gym as well.
Yeah, I'm not a physical therapist, but I think core strength is really a key component in all type of athletic motions in terms of being strong too. If you have like a strong base and something to rely on, you'll feel a lot better. Looking at minutes wise, what do you expect to see him in terms of a minute jump? Obviously, last year only played around 20 minutes. What do you think he's going to be at this year?
Yeah, I mean, if we're being optimistic, he could push that 30 mark. If he's ready for that, I think that we'll see, his minutes slowly increase throughout the season last year. And I think that we're likely to see something similar. Obviously, we don't want to. He's one of our cornerstone guys. We don't want to throw him into the pack of wolves, so early on. But I think depending on the matchup, depending on how his play is going, depending on his body, I think that he could see, an average of maybe 25 minutes per game. But there will be nights where we'll see more than that. And of course, will be nights where we see less than that. But I think around that 25-minute range, he'll be splitting center time with a guy like Ed Davis, who is a proven NBA center in this league. So I think it's going to be around that sort of range. You got something similar for me, Nick?
I think he's actually going to boost a little bit more. I think he'll be closer to 28.
Okay.
I think he's going to provide a defensive mentality in which Kenny and Sean have talked about so much in the press conference, being that they want to have this defensive player out there. And I think Allen understands his role with the team very well based off of what we've heard from him. And I think 28 minutes isn't too crazy because they'll be able to kind of take him out. And like you said, maybe he won't play as much against some of the bigger guys, but in some of these other matchups, a lot of teams don't even play big centers because there's such a liability on the floor. I think Jarrett Allen will provide that versatility and get up to 28 minutes. I wouldn't even be surprised later in the season if he gets closer to 30.
Yeah, there were no Nets players last season that averaged more than 29.9 minutes, and that was DeMar Carroll. So obviously there might be, I think that we'll see that from Coach Kenny. And there are some nice pieces on the Nets Republic, including one from yourself, shameless self-promotion, about Coach Kenny and his distribution in terms of his minutes and his rotations. But do you think, like, straight away, Nick, that you're going to see, against the Knicks in opening night against Detroit and those sort of opening games, that you'll see 28 minutes per night from a guy like Jarrett Allen? Or is it going to be a sort of wait-and-see proposition from a guy like Coach Kenny?
I'll have a better idea after preseason, but I think we're going to see a lot of experiments still with, like, Kenny's just has a lot of new toys now. Like, he has a lot of different options where he maybe didn't have last year. And, going against Andre Drummond and Enes Kanter, that's not necessarily the best matchup for Jarrett Allen. So you maybe might see a little bit more Ed Davis, but I think as the season progresses, he'll get closer to those higher numbers. But I think it'll be kind of a give and feel type of thing. Now, in terms of usage, or actually before we get there, do you think Jarrett Allen will have a better chance at finishing games this year? We see him more at the end of the game than we did last year. We saw him a little bit more towards the end of the season, but early in the year, he really didn't close out.
Yeah, I think defensively, he's easily in our best defensive lineups, but I think it's going to be on the offensive end. Is he going to be, there were times where he was a little bit of a liability out there. In terms of his field goal percentage during those clutch moments. I remember looking up, and he was one of our worst players. And obviously, we're not going through Jarrett Allen, but it's being able to make the right play, make the right kick out, not turn the ball over. I think it's going to come down to, is his maturity, is his experience, is his game in those closing moments good enough to be able to give it to him? He's not going to turn the ball over. He's not going to give it up. He's going to finish those oops. He'll make the right pass out of the pick and roll. So for me, it's not a question of defense. It's a question of offense. But I certainly think, that by the end of the season, we'll definitely be seeing Jarrett Allen out there. He's not a liability like you mentioned about plenty of other NBA centers.
And I think, depending on the matchup, we see a lot of teams go small. I think if a team were to play big, I think Jarrett Allen would be the guy they want to close with in most situations. If he can prove he can get the rebounds, because I think that's one thing important to Kenny. And we saw it last year at times for the Nets to play great defense in under 2 minutes, but they'd give up that offensive rebound, have to do it again. The team would hit like a three or get an and one or something, and that would just kind of kill all momentum. So I think, being that defensive monster like we've talked about, but also being a rebounder. I think rebounding is so important, especially when you're playing smaller lineups.
Yeah, for sure. You're using what you've got, to your capabilities. And if he can show good defensive and offensive rebounding capabilities, then Coach Kenny's going to leave him out there.
Yeah, and to get back to the offensive rebounding, putback-wise, he finished in the 37 percentile. So I think there's a lot more potential there, especially with his athleticism and his length. We mentioned this before. Studying somebody like a Tyson Chandler, I think, would really help him. And I read a rumor yesterday that the Nets actually almost traded for Tyson Chandler before they got Ed Davis. So that was something interesting to think about, too. So maybe they have that in their mind as well. But usage-wise, do you expect to see him bump up at all or stay around the same?
Yeah, so last season he was at that 16.3%. Not many big men, demand sort of the ball in the post these days, other than like Joel Embiid and DeMarcus Cousins and probably Dwight Howard. But I think that we'll probably see him stay around that range. There'll be nights where he'll have more of the ball, but Jarrett Allen works best when he's just finishing the plays. We did see some signs at summer leagues when he had the ball in his hands, which were quite nice. Obviously against inferior competition, but that's when you want to see those, different sort of skills on display. So I think that, it might hover around the same range, but I wouldn't be surprised if it gets up to like around an 18% range because, Coach Kenny's going to want the ball in his hands more. He's going to be finishing players more. He'll be making those dunks. He'll be getting those offensive rebounds. So I think it increases, but that's just by virtue of just experience and playing time.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think around the 18%, a slight bump. And maybe, like we mentioned at Summer League, when I think he took somebody off the dribble and like posterized them. If he has one of these slower bigs on him, like somebody along like a Mozgov or Costa Kufis or something along those lines that really isn't a fast guy, I wouldn't be upset if Jarrett Allen wanted to try to take a dribble on him. And I think, that as much as the Nets want to be competitive, they still want to develop Jarrett Allen and let him kind of try out new things.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that Coach Kenny, just because he has the talent at his disposal, is still allowing these guys. There was a really cool video with Gilbert Arenas that was out the other day showing just how the impact that a coach can have on the talent and development of so many players. If you're given that green light to just, make mistakes, then that's going to have a real positive impact on your development. It's going to be a huge factor for D'Lo when we do his player preview as well when we're talking about it. But I think even more so, and as equally so for a guy like Jarrett Allen.
Yeah, I think Spencer did what he said. The green light is the greatest drug known to man, or something along those lines. So
he did. Yep.
So, but getting to the predictions on the actual stats, what's your stat line for Jarrett Allen? Give me some points, some rebounds, minutes, assists, blocks. What do you got?
Yep. So I'm going the 25 minutes per night. I'm going 11 and a half points per game. I'm going to go a tad over 7 rebounds per game and chuck in 1.5 blocks. So there's growth on all facets of the floor. And, maybe chuck in an assist in a little bit here or there because we saw some nice passes. But I think around those range for me, you can bump up those numbers depending on the minutes. So you might have maybe a little bit higher than me, Nick, but I don't think that those are bad numbers. I think that the rebounding could be an area where we see massive growth. But in terms of points and such, I think that the emphasis won't be on him as much to be a scorer. But, he was at about 8 or so last season. If he can hit that 10 range, I'm maybe being a little bit optimistic with the 11. But those are just my thoughts. What are your numbers?
No, I think you're fair. I have 28 minutes, like I said before, 12 points per game. I think maybe a touch under 8 rebounds, maybe not to that point, but like the 7 range. I think that's going to be a real focus of him. And he seems like a guy when he has a goal in mind. And he criticized himself yesterday about being a better rebounder too. And I think the blocks probably a shade under 2, maybe not up to that 2 mark, but between 1.5 and like 1.9. And like you said, maybe a touch over 1 assist. What were you thinking field goal percentage wise, 3-point percentage wise, and how many threes a game are you thinking?
I'm thinking 1, maybe 1.5. There'll be nights where he'll have a few more. I think he was at like 33% last year. He tracked a couple. His mechanics looked okay. There were a couple of air balls here and there. But I remember Jarrett Allen saying in an interview, he's saying, he's not going to be crazy about it. He's going to just take the right shots, similar to what Brook Lopez did. He's going to use that as a sort of model. Like, this is sort of like a first season for him being given the green light. Kenny Atkinson gives everyone the green light when it comes to the perimeter shooting, and it's something we love, and it's a huge part of our offensive system. So I think a little bit over that. I mentioned his effective field goal percentage was somewhere near 60%. If he can maintain that, that would be, awesome, because if you're anywhere in that 60% range, it shows, I think his 2-point percentage was like just a smidge under that as well.
Yeah,
and if
58%, I think, or something along those lines, are very high.
If his 3-point shooting and his free throw shooting stays the same, and his 3-point shooting maybe gets a little bit better, then he can exceed that, effective field goal percentage of 60%, which for me, I think is the number that we should all be looking at when it comes to overall, field goal percentage. And it's not just being a stat nerd about it; it just encompasses.
This makes more sense.
It just does. And for those that don't know, just check it out on B-Ball Reference. It's very, very clearly and plainly over there to see.
Yeah, honestly, Jack, I'm pretty much 100% in agreement. As my co-host on the outlet would say, copy and paste. So I think that we're in pretty much agreement to Jarrett Allen. Very high in him and what he can do. Give me some takes about Jarrett Allen that you kind of expect to see this season. Maybe where he finishes as a center in terms of the league. How much hype will he have?
Yes, so Nick, I got into the Reddit research. So when you get down that road, you're definitely going down some weird and wacky ways. But they had some like nice listicles about who are the top 10 centers and honorable mentions and stuff. And around that sort of 10 range, you see guys like Steven Adams, DeAndre Jordan, Marc Gasol, Yusuf Nurkic. I think that Jarrett Allen has the potential to be knocking on the door of that. If he finished in the top 15 of centers by the end of the season, I wouldn't be surprised. I'd be very surprised if he is a top 5, top 10 center in that range. But I think that he has real potential to push himself to be one of the premier centers in terms of top half in the league. All the things that we've talked about, rebounding, 3-point shooting, defense, he's got a lot of those already at his disposal. It's about the development that he can show. But at the same time, even if he just shows minor improvements in his second season, the sophomore slump is very real across many players. I'd be equally as happy. But I think he has plenty of potential to sort of knock on the door of any of those sort of lists.
Yeah, I think top half of the league is kind of like a goal where he kind of looked to finish. Maybe even if it was like around that 17 or 16 mark, but I think he'll be closer to between like 15 and 11. There's just a lot of potential, and his skill set just fits the new NBA like we mentioned earlier. Do you think he'll start to get more hype around the league just because of like having the afro, throwing down big dunks and blocks?
Yeah, I think it's going to be about how well we do as a team, Nick. I mentioned this plenty. It's about the success of the squad. I think that the Nets as a team overall are getting plenty of traction and getting plenty of credence from not just, guys and listeners of the Brooklyn Buzz and people at Nets Republic, but the outside NBA world. And I think with that, our players, Jarrett Allen is a darling of NBA Twitter because he's just low key, just so good. He's a gamer. He's a really a great citizen in terms of his community outreach. So I think he's going to start to get some more love as the team continues to get love. And if we're knocking on the door of the playoffs, Jarrett Allen's definitely going to be getting his credence, and he's definitely going to be a big part of that if that happens to be the case.
Yeah, I agree. I think the hype will definitely come on. He's just kind of like attractive in the sense of being, the oops and the blocks. And I think, general NBA fans just love that. And then the afro just kind of makes him stick out. We saw the great picture with D'Angelo you posted up there. In terms of offense or defense at the end of the season, which is going to be a bigger strength for Jarrett Allen?
It's going to be defense. I think when it comes to centers, you want them to be a better defender than offender, I guess, for lack of a better term. But at the same time, if he can bridge that gap, I think that's going to be more important. If he can maintain, say, his defensive capabilities and be able to switch upon to the smaller players, while also increase his rebounding and his ability in the pick and roll, and a couple of 3-point shots here and there, perimeter shots here and there, then I think that's going to be important. If I'm asking you, Nick, what do you value more for a guy like Jarrett Allen in terms of our net system right now?
I think defense is obviously having a guy like that in the back line that can block shots and clean up messes when you have guys that are, maybe questionable defenders. And then rebounding, I think, is always huge defensively. What I'd like to see is, like you said, balance it out. and maybe still be more skilled defensively and have a better game on that side of the floor, but have just as big an impact offensively. I remember doing the Clippers preview podcast and talking to Robert Flom, who's a Clippers guy, and he was saying one thing he thinks they're going to miss a ton from DeAndre. It's not the fact that he's such a skilled offensive player, but the fact when he rolls to the rim, it just collapses so much. And I think Jarrett Allen can have that impact with the athleticism, that length, and just the ability to finish.
Absolutely. I think a DeAndre comparison, I think in terms of his dunking, Jarrett Allen does have a ways to go, and this is via a Nets Republic piece. He missed 16.6% of his dunk attempts last season.
It drives you nuts too.
And he was fourth worst amongst the 30 starting centers. He was ahead of Marcin Gortat and John Collins, and he was a little bit around that sort of Kevin Love range. So I think for me, it's just going to be about experience, like we've sort of talked about in the past. He's got all the capabilities. He's got the athleticism. He's got the biceps now for it. He's got the deltoids for it, as plenty of guys would like to say. But it's going to be about execution. And I think he's got all the tools at his disposal to be able to execute at a high level.
Yeah, I felt like there was a stretch during the season where he missed like a couple dunks, and it was like a couple game span where he almost got like in a slump for dunking. So I think, just making sure you drop the ball on the rim doesn't always have to be a hard finish. Honestly, the ball just has to go through the rim. But any last takes you want to get at Jarrett Allen, Jack?
No, I think that Jarrett Allen is going to be a crucial part to the next success this season. I'll be one that'll be watching him very closely. I'm a low-key, horrible center, and when it comes to 5-on-5 pickup basketball, and I, funnily enough, will steal little moves that I saw from, we talked about how he sort of doesn't necessarily make the pick, but rolls really hard. I've done that many a time, so I'm hoping to steal some moves from him next season to take into my pickup ball.
Oh, there we go, Jack. That's all that matters. But actually, I got one last question for you.
Yeah.
In terms of where Jarrett Allen's going to finish on the Nets in terms of players, is he going to be the second best, the first, third? Where's he at?
Yeah, I remember, I think we had a fan question about this in the past, and it was one for me that I think Jarrett Allen has the ability to be our best player. In that case, I think that D'Angelo might not be a Net in the future, so I don't necessarily want that to be the case, but I think that it's one or two for me at Jarrett Allen right now. It's at the lowest three. It's LeVert, it's Allen, and it's D'Lo. I think you could probably roll the dice, put it on shuffle and just throw and just see what happens with those three. And I think all of them would have a legitimate case in different ways. But obviously, you don't necessarily, unless you're a Nikola Jokic or a Joel Embiid, the NBA is, really sort of revolutionized in terms of how the big man is making an impact these days. But in terms of the Nets right now, I would much rather him to be a second or third best player. But he certainly has all the skills and all the expertise and the motivation to become one of our best, if not our best player.
But Jack, as always, a pleasure talking Nets with you. Check out otgbasketball.com. Check out netsrepublic.com. Follow us on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, YouTube, Dash Radio, and let us know what you think on Twitter.